Today will be our fourth video in the shop organization series. This one focused on hardware storage. Unfortunately, a lot of hardware comes in packages that's made to look nice on a shelf before you buy it on a peg hook or bought individually, but not so much with the logic of how is it going to look once you get it home, will it store properly, those kind of things. There are a lot of different ways you can do this, and I'm going to walk you through how I did mine, the different steps that I went through, the different variations, what I liked, didn't like, and why I made changes to mine. Again, the point of this series is not to say that my way is the best way. It's just what has worked for me, and I'm hoping that this will open the conversation and get people to think and ask themselves, is what I'm doing now the most efficient way to utilize my space?
So early on, like many, I just had a bunch of boxes lying around that the fasteners originally came in, even if the box was almost empty. As time went on, I bought units like this one to get more organized, and at first I liked them a lot, until I quickly realized that almost any box of screws I would buy would fill up the entire container, and there's a bunch of overflow left over. Because of this, I'd have to have the boxes elsewhere, which just took up more room and defeated the purpose of the container. I also just didn't like how flimsy they were, and overall just didn't seem like it was utilizing space very well. Eventually I made this screw box holder, which I still use to this day. I like this holder because I buy screws and nails by the pound typically, and they're one of the few hardware packages that come in a universal size and actually do a good job of telling you what's inside from the side of the box, so it's easy to read as you store it. Which is nice, so I don't have to make a label for everything. There's enough space for me to have multiple lengths of screws that I use, including fine threads for hardwoods, normal drywall screws because they're cheap and I'll use them for projects that don't require a ton of strength, construction screws for any heavy-duty projects, and then exterior screws for anything that will be outside. For other things, I tried the method that so many love, these hardware organizers. I figured because so many people use them that they must be the way to go. However, it didn't take long until I became unhappy with them as well, and looked for yet another solution. I'll explain why I didn't like them later, but from there I tried these Harbor Freight storage bins. They were larger in size, giving me more space, they weren't overly expensive, and what I didn't know when I bought my first pack is that they come ready to be mounted to the wall. I liked them so much I started to get more and more of them over time when they went on sale as my hardware collection grew. It took me multiple times to find its final location, and there were more reasons than just space. This was the first place I had them in, behind the miter saw. It didn't take long to realize this was a horrible choice as they would fill up with sawdust very quickly. This was actually before I made the upgraded dust collection for the miter saw. The second area I liked a lot, which was just on the opposite wall just a few feet away. The great thing with these bins is they're really easy to remove from the wall when needed to bring over to the workbench. The bad news was that they're really easy to remove from the wall when I didn't want them to be. Sometimes I would just be walking by or pulling my bench out and the one on the end would fall off, which of course was the bin filled with miscellaneous nuts and would hit the ground and fly all over the place. This is why I moved them for the third time to above the workbench. I knew I would never bump these, they're out of the way from sawdust for the most part, and I was much happier with this solution. Let me show you how I did it.
So I started putting these up on the wall and I realized that my wall is very bowed. It's not sitting flat whatsoever. A lot of the mounts aren't sitting properly. The bins aren't sitting down inside of them right. They're kind of crooked. So I have a spare piece of MDF. I'm gonna pull that out and mount all the wall mounts to that. And then hopefully that helps create a flat surface to then mount that to the wall directly. I'm still waiting for 3 packs of these bins to come in. So we can at least get this part of it done and then add the other 3 rows later. So being able to actually have the board flat, using gravity to my advantage, having clamps, those kind of things to keep a straight edge straight, it made it a lot easier to get those wall mounts up. In this space, I'll have enough room for 20 bins across, 9 rows high, giving me a total of 180 bins for this space. I waited until they went on sale for about $10 a piece. They actually just last week were on sale for $8 a piece for their early Black Friday special. So keep an eye on those because you can save a lot of money if you're gonna buy this many of them at once. So all said and done, this big part of the project is gonna cost me less than $100, not including the MDF. I already had that laying around, so I'm not gonna count that as material. And not everyone needs that because their wall may be flat to begin with. So all it's up to do is I have to go get the last of the labels that are printing off, and then we can get the bins up on the wall and organized. Those printed off, you should be good to go now. Yeah, I don't get the reference. It's weird. 28 to 3. It's 28 minus 3. Anyways, this was the perfect space for them. They're far enough away from the saw because there's a shelf above them, dust won't settle into the bins as much, and because they're tucked away, I won't bump into them and knock them off like I used to. And because they're low profile, I lose very little bench top space. Next, I want to take a second to compare the Harbor Freight or Stanley hardware organizers versus the method that I chose to go with. For sake of simplicity, let's call the popular method yellow bins, and my way, gray bins. Yellow bin lovers, be gentle with the downvotes. I know a lot of you love that method. I'm just being honest, and this is what worked best for me. At the end of this, if you still love your yellow bins, that's awesome too.
First is storage capacity. Both of these have 20 bins per unit. The gray bins I use cost $2 more per package at full retail. Both units go on sale all the time throughout the year, but to keep it simple, we'll just compare full retail price. The big difference here is the space that each gives you. The gray bins give you 1,200 square inches of storage versus only 302 square inches in the yellow bins. So they give you almost 4 times the storage for only $2 more, which is well worth it to me. Now, do I always use the full height of each bin? No. But even if they were the same height, it would still be about 2.5 times the storage. Second, they come ready to be mounted to the wall right out of the box. You don't have to create a separate holder or special cabinet for them, which cuts down on overall time and cost. Having the ability to stack or wall mount these was a big reason I bought so many of them and decided to make them my primary storage option. These also sit very low profile to the wall versus sticking out further like the yellow bin containers would. Where I put these above the workbench, I wouldn't have been able to do so with the yellow storage containers. So basically, I traded wall space for airspace and bench space. However, that wall space was greatly limited with what I could use it for because of where it's located. Third, they're easier to see what you have inside of them. If you have the yellow bins stacked together, you can't see what's in each bin. You have to pull them out, look inside each container individually to see what's inside. Fourth, it's easier to get what you need. If you need a specific screw from the yellow bin, even if you know what bin it's in, you still have to remove the container, set it down on a surface, which takes up bench space, open the latches, open the lid, grab the item you want, close the lid, relatch the unit, lift the unit off the bench, and then put it back in its location. With the gray bins, it's one step. I just grab the item I need. That's it. I understand this is a bit of a dramatic reenactment, but the more steps you add to your daily routine and things you'd be doing multiple times throughout a project or the day, it adds up. And 5, more likely to be left sitting out. This kind of plays off the previous step. When I use the yellow bin method, I would either take the entire yellow bin unit over to the bench, which would take up more bench space than what a gray bin would, or I would set it down on the miter station and then just take the individual unit bin over that I needed. But by doing that, I was more likely to leave the rest of the containers sit on my miter station because I typically don't put things back away if they're not whole. I would wait until I was done using the bin, put it back in the container, and then put it away. 6, it's much easier to label and therefore stay organized. The gray bins, I can keep things uniform and labeled very clearly. In the yellow bins, if they get full, it's tough to see what's inside. And if you put the label on the lid instead, if you try to move around the bins inside, you have to peel the sticker off, hope it sticks again. It's just kind of a clunky process. The gray bins, I just lift and move them, and I'm done. As for the cons, the gray bins are not as portable, so if you work on the go or plan to take these out of the shop consistently, this might not be a good holistic solution for you. You might be better off with still a set or two of the yellow bins for the portability. And second, like I mentioned earlier, the tops are open and you will get sawdust in them. The trade-off for not having a lid and just being able to grab what you need really quickly is that dust will get inside those bins. So every couple months, I just blow them out with the air compressor and they're good to go. And the way I look at it is I'm just giving my screws a preview of what the rest of their life is going to look like being stuck in a board forever. Tends to make them a little less reluctant to go in later on.
Now let's discuss what's here, how I organize it, and why I might be OCD. I'll say it again, this may be overkill for a lot of people, but if it's something you want to replicate, know it doesn't have to happen overnight. We will discuss that a little later in the video, but for now, let's walk through how I organize this in detail. This next part might be boring or tedious for some, but I didn't want to skip it because a lot of videos you see, they show you how they built organization, but not the logic or how they actually went through and organized the pieces themselves. So for those that don't want the detail, there'll be a link in the description below to skip ahead. For those that do, let's get to it.
So starting from the left, I have bolts of 3 different diameters going from largest to smallest. At the top, there's 6 different sizes going from shortest to longest. And then below, I have a bin for washers, nuts, and T-nuts matching the size of the bolt above them. Next, we continue the same idea but move to machine screws for smaller projects going from number 12 down to number 6. Next are the smaller wood screws going from number 4 to number 10 sorted by length. Next to that, I have Kreg screws when I use pocket holes, sorted by soft and hardwood screws, then by length. After that, I have more specialty screws, including white exterior and Tapcon screws for concrete. Next are nails for my nail gun. These are sorted by gauge and length. Next to that are just regular nails, sorted by type, diameter, and length. The next section are staples for my staple gun. These are separated by galvanized or stainless, and then by length. Then I have pop rivets, which are sorted by steel or aluminum, and then by length. Next to that, I have wing nuts. And finally, these last 3 columns are just miscellaneous bins of items that I have. Some of these are just dump bins for random hardware I have accumulated over the years. Some likely end up going somewhere else as the wall expands with time, but again, I have the room here for now, so it frees up space elsewhere for the time being. There are a ton of possibilities with these bins, and as your collection expands or changes, it's very quick and easy to shift these bins around to make room for whatever you need.
Next will be storage for smaller hardware that I didn't need bins with such a large capacity for.
These were items bought in a variety pack that I either normally can't go and just buy at a local store, or if I do, they cost me an arm and a leg. These are really handy for small repairs, and now that I'm getting more into 3D printing, I find myself using them more and more for assembly or for the printer itself for maintenance. I also have these small lock washers and grommets that I want to keep separated by size, but don't have near enough to justify using a large bin for. Last, although it isn't hardware, it's still a type of fastener, so I figured I'd cover my zip tie storage. I originally took an idea I saw online using PVC pipes as the storage for these. This was easy to put together, but because it's round, you actually waste about 25% of the space than if you just use a square container that occupied the same amount of space. I took this down the day I removed the pegboard and just never put it back up. So one day I put this together in just a couple hours. This gives me a ton of storage for them. I can fit hundreds of each type in here. I'm not worried about them really ever going bad as they're zip ties, and I don't have to worry about having overflow somewhere else because they wouldn't all fit in the certain storage area.
So you might be thinking, that's great. Now I know how to store the hardware if I want to look like a hardware store. But how do I get the hardware if I don't want to take out a second mortgage for it? Well, I got you. Next, we will talk about building your hardware and fastener collection. In the past, when I needed a piece, I would run to the hardware store, buy exactly what I need, and then come back. I've since changed my thought process for a few reasons. First off, having to make a special trip to the hardware store every time I needed a certain fastener was a huge waste of time. For me, the closest store is about 15 minutes away, and that's if lights and traffic play in my favor. So by the time that I grab my wallet, my car keys, turn off the music, go outside of the car, drive to the store, find what I want, buy it, check out, come back home, put wallet and keys away, turn music back on, I've wasted almost an hour of my day. And there's times that's happened multiple times in one day, so I'm wasting a good chunk of my day to get something else done. Or sometimes I've bought the wrong thing, or got a few steps further in the project and needed another thing, and had to make another trip to the hardware store, wasting even more time. We've all been there. The point is that, to me, these things don't expire, they don't go bad, so having a bunch of them on hand to save me time, it'll pay for itself in the long run.
2, buying in bulk will save you money in the long run. You can find tons of deals at stores or online that are a percentage off if you buy a certain quantity of the item, sometimes up to half off or even more. Here are a few pointers that I learned when looking to stock up on hardware for my shop that could save you money. First, check online prices. Sometimes a price in store is different than it is online. Take this box of nuts for instance at the Blue store. Buying them individually is 12 cents, so for 100 that would be 12 bucks. You can see here that it says buy 100 you save 10%, which would take it to $10.80. This is the price you see when you walk into the store to buy a box of 100 off the shelf. However, if you buy it online, even if you set it as store pickup, it's only $6.98. So instead of saving 10%, we actually save 42%. Same thing holds true with these washers. A site I recently discovered is boltdepot.com. They have a huge selection and their site is very well organized. I ordered a bunch of number 12 machine screws as they're tough to find in stores in the style that I wanted. And I had a gap in between number 10 size machine screws and 1/4 inch bolts that I needed to have a solution for. They had really great prices, they came nicely packaged and organized, and they have a flat shipping rate, so if you're going to do something like this, be sure to buy enough to where it makes it worth your while. Again, I have no affiliation with any of these three places I just mentioned, I just wanted to give you my opinion on them and what I found. And second, for specialty items especially, check for variety packs. You can save a ton of money if you think you'll ever end up using something similar in the future. For instance, if I walk into the orange store today and I need to buy an M5 16mm socket head screw, I'm paying $1.22 for a 2-pack, or 66 cents per unit. Here is a variety pack online that is 510 pieces for about 15 bucks, or 3 cents per unit. Even if we only include the bolts and exclude the nuts, it's under 6 cents per unit, so less than 10% of the price per unit you would pay if you walked into the store and bought them today. I've bought a ton of variety packs myself, and it's how I created a lot of my collection. Here are a few that I've purchased to save money. Some were in store and some were online.
Are you going to use them all right away? Probably not. Are they the same quality you'd buy if you ran into a store today? Sometimes, sometimes not. But do you really even need high-end fasteners if you're going to let glue do most of the heavy lifting anyway? The other thing is, if you have the space for it, why not have them at your disposal to use when you need them? Again, I wouldn't recommend buying in bulk for things like glue or paint that are going to dry up and go bad on you. But these things aren't going to go bad in a year or two in your shop, even if it isn't climate controlled. Why would we trust a bolt to hold a ton of weight over its lifespan, but not just sit in a bin for a couple of years? It doesn't make any sense. So that's when I finish it up for hardware storage. I hope that you enjoyed it and that it's worth the wait. Hopefully it gave you some ideas that you can implement to help get your shop better organized as well. I understand not everyone's going to have the room or the wall space to replicate my exact layout, but the same idea and theory holds true whether it's 20 bins or 180. Now that you've seen the video, I have a question for all of you. I have a bunch of these containers that are from a protein powder that I drink, that I have about 15 of them. And currently they just sit up high on a shelf in my garage because I don't know what else to do with them. I intentionally waited until after this video is posted because I knew if I asked prior, everyone would just say, use it for hardware storage. And obviously you can see, I don't need it for that. I'd love to find a good use for them rather than just recycling them or throwing them away. So if you have any ideas, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. So if you like what you saw or learned something new, be sure to like the video. If you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to check out other videos on my channel and make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you notify when new videos come out. And for those that don't know, if you don't click the bell, subscribing will not notify you when a new video is posted for myself or other people you subscribe to. Not only that, what most people don't know is that YouTube defaults it to what's called personalized. What that means is that it's going to go through your viewing habits on what you click on, don't click on, and when you subscribe to somebody, it's going to tailor it to that. So if you don't always click on new videos, or if you don't always click on the community tab when they publish something, it won't always notify you when somebody posts something. For example, I've had a lot of people asking for plans for the flip top workbench, and I finished them about a few weeks ago. I posted in the community tab about it, and not a lot of people actually saw that because they don't have all checked under the notification settings. So be sure, if you want more content from myself or other YouTubers, make sure you have the proper things checked for your settings. Because not many people saw it, I'm going to extend the sale for all plans on the website for another week, and that will include the flip top workbench as well. Second, I did finally get a Patreon set up for those that requested it. Thank you to Dadbod Zod for being my first gold member. I appreciate the support. This isn't the end of this series, but the next few videos will not be related to it necessarily. The next ones that I want to work on for the series, I don't even have done. They're still in the planning process. So instead, I'm going to focus on older projects that I already completed. This will also allow me to catch up. So right now, I feel like I'm posting on Instagram what I'm currently working on, knowing that the video probably won't be out for another 6 or 7 months. And that's not a good experience for anybody. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. So if you like what you saw or learned something new, be sure to like the video. If you'd like to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. Nope, that's wrong. Now let's discuss what's here. It's gnats.